Before she became a headline, before she became a mystery, Elizabeth Short was simply a little girl born into an ordinary American family, a family with hopes, dreams, and plans for the future. Elizabeth Short entered the world on July 29, 1924, in Hyde Park, Massachusetts, a quiet community outside Boston. She was the third of 5 daughters, one child among many. Raised during a time when America was changing rapidly, her father was Cleo Short, a businessman, ambitious, restless, always looking for opportunity. Her mother, Phoebe May Short, hardworking, protective, determined. Together, they appeared to be building a comfortable life. At first, the family wasn't wealthy, but they managed. Cleo found success constructing miniature golf courses, and during the Roaring '20s, business was booming, money flowed, the future seemed bright. For a while, the Short family enjoyed stability, a home, a routine, a sense of security. But beneath the surface, storm clouds were gathering, and before Elizabeth reached her teenage years, everything would change. The Great Depression was coming, and it would destroy countless American families, including hers. The little girl who would one day become one of the most famous murder victims in history had no way of knowing. That tragedy was already moving toward her, step by step, year by year, waiting. 1929. America collapsed, banks failed, businesses disappeared overnight, dreams vanished, and for Cleo Short, the crash was devastating. His miniature golf business collapsed, money became scarce, pressure mounted, debt grew. Then, something strange happened. Cleo's car was discovered abandoned near a bridge. Authorities searched, rumors spread, many feared the worst. Had he taken his own life? Had he fallen into the river? Had he disappeared forever? For months, nobody knew. The family grieved. Phoebe believed she had become a widow. 5 young daughters believed their father was dead, Elizabeth included. But the truth was far different. Cleo Short was alive, very much alive. He had simply left, abandoned his family, and started over elsewhere, without warning, without explanation, without his children, without Elizabeth. Imagine that moment. A little girl learning that her father hadn't died. He had chosen to leave. The emotional damage was enormous for Phoebe. The burden became crushing. She now had 5 daughters to raise alone during the worst economic crisis in American history. No husband, no financial support, no safety net, just responsibility and survival. Every day became a struggle. Phoebe worked tirelessly, taking whatever job she could find, trying to keep food on the table, trying to keep a roof over their heads, trying to protect her daughters from a world that seemed determined to break them. Elizabeth watched all of it, the exhaustion, the sacrifice, the uncertainty. Children often carry wounds they cannot explain, and abandonment leaves scars, invisible ones, scars that can shape an entire life. Some investigators would later wonder whether her father's disappearance helped fuel Elizabeth's search for affection, for attention, for love, for someone who wouldn't leave. But those answers died with her. And perhaps even she never truly knew. What is certain is that Elizabeth grew up in a household defined by struggle, a household where dreams often collided with reality and where survival came first. Yet despite the hardship, Elizabeth never stopped dreaming, not even for a moment. As Elizabeth entered her teenage years, she began to stand out, not because of wealth, not because of status, but because of something harder to define: presence. People noticed her. She possessed striking dark hair, pale skin, expressive eyes, a look that seemed almost cinematic. Friends described her as charming, flirtatious, sometimes unpredictable. She enjoyed attention, and she knew how to attract it. But life wasn't easy. Elizabeth suffered from chronic bronchitis and asthma. Doctors believed the cold New England climate worsened her condition. To improve her health, she spent long periods in warmer states, particularly Florida. The contrast was dramatic. Palm trees, sunshine, freedom, a world far removed from Massachusetts, and Elizabeth loved it. She embraced adventure, movement, excitement. Routine bored her. Rules frustrated her. Authority rarely impressed her. She drifted between schools, between cities, between temporary homes, always searching for something, though nobody seemed entirely sure what that something was. Friends remembered a young woman who enjoyed socializing, dancing, meeting new people, especially young men. But her rebellious streak occasionally led to trouble. In 1943, while still underage, Elizabeth was arrested for drinking alcohol, a relatively minor offense, yet one that revealed something important. She was testing boundaries, pushing limits, trying to create her own path. Authorities handled the matter quickly. No one imagined the arrest would become a footnote in one of America's most infamous murder cases. At the time, she was simply another teenager, young, restless, and searching for her place in the world. What nobody knew was that Elizabeth's life was already moving toward Los Angeles, toward Hollywood, toward the dreams that consumed so many young women of her generation. Dreams of glamour, beauty, fame, and reinvention. Dreams that glittered from a distance, but often hid darkness beneath the surface. And for Elizabeth Short, that darkness was waiting, patiently, in the City of Angels, for millions of young women. Hollywood was more than a city. It was a promise, a place where ordinary people could become extraordinary, a place where dreams came true, or so they believed, and Elizabeth Short believed it too. By the mid-1940s, America was emerging from war. Movies dominated popular culture. Movie stars were treated like royalty. Their faces filled magazines. Their names echoed across the country. They represented beauty, success, escape. And Elizabeth was captivated by that world. She wasn't alone. Thousands of young women traveled west hoping to find opportunity, hoping to be discovered, hoping to become somebody. Elizabeth was one of them. She had a striking appearance, dark hair, fair skin, a poised elegance that often drew attention. People noticed her when she entered a room, men especially. Some described her as beautiful, others described her as mysterious. Many remembered her years after meeting her. There was something unforgettable about her, something difficult to explain. But beauty alone doesn't tell the whole story. The real Elizabeth Short was far more complicated. Friends described her as friendly, talkative, charming. She enjoyed meeting new people. She loved conversation, and she loved attention. Not necessarily fame, but attention. The feeling of being seen, of being admired, of mattering. She often told stories about herself, stories that weren't always true. At times she exaggerated details of her life. At times she reinvented parts of her past. Some saw this as dishonesty. Others saw it differently. A young woman creating the version of herself she wished existed. A dreamer, trying to transform reality into something more glamorous. Money was often scarce, yet Elizabeth worked hard to maintain an image. She dressed carefully, styled her hair, applied makeup, presented herself with confidence, even when her circumstances were uncertain, even when she had nowhere permanent to stay. She wanted people to see possibility, not struggle. Los Angeles seemed like the perfect place for someone like Elizabeth. A city built on appearances, a city filled with dreamers, a city where reinvention wasn't unusual. It was expected. Everywhere she looked, people were chasing something, an acting career, a modeling contract, a wealthy marriage, a better future. Elizabeth chased her own version of that dream, though exactly what she hoped to achieve remains unclear. Despite popular myths, there is no evidence Elizabeth was a successful actress, no evidence she landed major movie roles, no evidence she became part of Hollywood's elite. But she wanted to be close to that world, close to the glamour, close to the excitement, close to the people living the lives she imagined for herself. And for a time, it seemed possible. She attended social gatherings, met new acquaintances, spent time around servicemen, businessmen, aspiring actors, people drifting through Los Angeles in search of opportunity, much like she was. Some remembered her as optimistic, others remembered loneliness behind her smile. A young woman searching for stability, searching for love, searching for purpose, searching for a future she could finally call her own. Years later, many would try to define Elizabeth Short, to reduce her to a single label: a socialite, an actress, a drifter, a party girl, a victim. But human beings are rarely that simple. Elizabeth was many things at once: hopeful, vulnerable, ambitious, restless, charming, uncertain. And as she pursued her dreams in California, life seemed to offer new possibilities, new relationships, new experiences, perhaps even love. But one relationship in particular would leave a lasting mark on her heart. A relationship shaped by war and ending in tragedy. The heartbreak that followed would become one of the defining moments of Elizabeth Short's life, before she became a mystery, before her name filled newspaper headlines. Elizabeth Short was simply a young woman looking for something many people spend their entire lives searching for: love, real love, the kind that makes the future feel certain, the kind that makes tomorrow seem brighter than today. And for a brief moment, she believed she had found it. The Second World War had transformed America. Millions of young men were leaving home, crossing oceans, facing unimaginable danger. Every train station goodbye carried uncertainty. Every letter could be the last. Every promise depended on survival. It was during this turbulent period that Elizabeth met a young Army Air Forces officer named Major Matthew Michael Gordon Jr., a decorated serviceman, handsome, confident, respected by those around him, the kind of man many young women admired. But for Elizabeth, he became much more than that. The two formed a connection, a genuine one. Friends and family would later recall how deeply Elizabeth cared for him. Unlike many of the fleeting relationships that entered and exited her life, this one seemed different, more serious, more meaningful, more real. For perhaps the first time, Elizabeth could envision a future that felt stable, a future built around love rather than uncertainty. The war, however, had other plans. Matthew Gordon was sent overseas, thousands of miles away, into a conflict consuming the world, like countless couples of that era. They were separated by duty, separated by distance, separated by forces beyond their control, yet hope remained, because hope was all they had. Letters became lifelines, memories became comfort, dreams became survival. Elizabeth waited, like so many women across America, waiting for the war to end, waiting for the man she loved to come home, waiting for life to finally begin. Then came the news, the kind of news that changes a person forever, the kind of news that arrives without warning and never truly leaves. Major Matthew Gordon had been severely injured during the war. His body survived, but the damage was catastrophic. Recovery proved impossible. In August of 1945, not long after the war ended, he died, just 26 years old. The war was over, America celebrated, cities erupted in joy, families reunited, church bells rang, victory had finally arrived. But for Elizabeth, victory meant nothing, because the man she loved was gone. Friends later described her as devastated, heartbroken, lost. The future she had imagined disappeared overnight. Every plan, every dream, every possibility, gone. Some researchers believe Gordon's death profoundly affected Elizabeth, not simply because she lost someone she cared about, but because it reinforced a painful pattern already present in her life. People left, people disappeared, people were taken away. First her father, now the man she believed she might marry. The wounds were different, but the result felt painfully familiar. Loss. Nobody can know exactly what Elizabeth felt during those months, the private thoughts she carried, the grief she hid, the questions she asked herself late at night. But those who knew her noticed changes, an emotional restlessness, a continued search for connection, a desire to find meaning after tragedy. Loss affects people differently. Some retreat inward, others keep moving, keep searching, keep hoping. Elizabeth chose movement. She continued forward, city to city, friend to friend, dream to dream, trying to outrun heartbreak, trying to find the future she once imagined. Yet grief has a way of traveling with us, no matter how far we go. And while Elizabeth continued chasing opportunity, the shadow of that loss never completely disappeared. It remained behind her smile, behind her conversations, behind her plans for tomorrow. In the months that followed, she would spend more time in California, more time in Los Angeles, more time among people chasing excitement, people chasing success, people chasing escape. The city seemed alive with possibility, but possibility can be dangerous, especially for someone searching for belonging. As Elizabeth entered the final chapter of her life, she drifted deeper into the social circles of post-war Los Angeles, a world of parties, late-night conversations, temporary friendships, and people whose motives were not always clear. Some would help her, others would use her, and somewhere within that crowded city, a killer was waiting. Though neither Elizabeth nor anyone around her could possibly know it yet, Los Angeles, the city of angels, a place built on dreams and illusions. By 1946, the war was over. America was changing. Young people flooded into California searching for opportunity, for excitement, for a fresh start. And Elizabeth Short was among them. On the surface, Los Angeles looked like paradise. Palm trees swayed beneath endless sunshine. Movie stars filled magazine covers. Nightclubs glowed long after midnight. Every street seemed to promise a better future. But beneath that glamorous image, the city hid another reality, a darker one. A city of transients, loners, drifters, people constantly arriving, people constantly disappearing, and nobody asking too many questions. Elizabeth never truly settled down. She moved frequently, living with friends, acquaintances, temporary roommates, sometimes staying only days, sometimes weeks, rarely long enough to establish roots. Her life became a series of temporary addresses, temporary friendships, temporary plans, always searching for the next opportunity, the next connection, the next chance to improve her circumstances. Despite her struggles, she remained remarkably social. Elizabeth had a gift for conversation. She could walk into a room full of strangers and leave with new friends. People remembered her laughter, her stories, her charm, even years later. Many recalled meeting her only once, yet never forgetting her. She spent time in cafes, restaurants, movie theaters, nightclubs, the places where young people gathered, the places where conversations turned into friendships, and friendships sometimes turned into something more. Many of the people she met were servicemen. The war had just ended. Uniforms were everywhere. Returning soldiers filled the city. Many were looking for companionship. Many were lonely. Many were trying to rebuild lives interrupted by war. Elizabeth often found herself surrounded by these men. Some admired her, some pursued her, some claimed to know her far better than they actually did. Years later, investigators would interview dozens upon dozens of men who had crossed paths with Elizabeth. Some barely knew her, others insisted they had been close friends. A few claimed romantic involvement. Separating fact from fiction would become nearly impossible. Because after her death, everyone seemed to have a story, and not every story was true. What is clear is that Elizabeth moved through many social circles, people from different backgrounds, different professions, different lifestyles, some respectable, others less so. She knew aspiring actors, military personnel, businessmen, bartenders, traveling workers, people living on the edges of Hollywood society. Money remained a constant problem. Friends often helped her, occasionally buying meals, offering temporary places to stay, helping her get by. Despite popular myths, there is little evidence Elizabeth lived a glamorous Hollywood lifestyle. The reality was far less glamorous. She was often struggling financially, trying to maintain appearances while facing uncertainty behind the scenes. Yet she refused to give up. She continued chasing possibilities, continued believing something better waited just around the corner, a lucky break, a meaningful relationship, a new beginning, whatever form it might take. Those who knew her described contradictions. She could be confident, then vulnerable, outgoing, then deeply private, hopeful, then discouraged. Like many young people trying to find their place in the world, she was still figuring out who she wanted to become. As 1946 came to an end, Elizabeth's life seemed suspended between possibilities. Nothing was fully stable, nothing was fully secure, but she kept moving forward, one day at a time, one conversation at a time, one opportunity at a time. Then came January of 1947, a new year, a new beginning, or so it seemed. No one could have imagined that within weeks, Elizabeth Short would become the center of one of the most infamous murder investigations in American history, a crime so shocking, so brutal, that newspapers across the nation would struggle to describe it. A crime that would transform a young woman chasing dreams into a legend. And on the morning of January 15th, 1947, a mother walking with her small child would make a discovery that would haunt America forever. January 15th, 1947, Los Angeles, California. It was a Wednesday morning, quiet, ordinary. The kind of morning that begins like thousands of others, people leaving for work, children preparing for school, neighbors tending to routines they would soon forget. But before the day was over, one horrifying discovery would change everything. Shortly after 10 a.m., a woman named Betty Bersinger was walking through a vacant lot with her young daughter. The lot sat in the Leimert Park area of Los Angeles, an undeveloped stretch of land, empty, silent, nothing unusual, at least at first glance. As Betty walked along the sidewalk, something in the grass caught her attention, a shape, pale, motionless, lying in the distance. From where she stood, it didn't immediately look like a body. In fact, her first thought was something far less sinister, a discarded mannequin, a store-displayed dummy, the kind sometimes thrown away and left in empty lots. But as she moved closer, the truth became impossible to ignore. This was not a mannequin. This was a human being, a young woman, lying in the grass, completely still. The sight was so shocking, so unnatural, that for a moment it hardly seemed real. Betty quickly pulled her daughter away, trying to shield the child from what she had seen. Then she rushed to find a telephone. Police were called immediately. Within minutes, officers arrived at the scene. What they found would leave even seasoned investigators stunned. Many had worked violent crimes before, many had witnessed death. But this was different, very different. The victim appeared to have been deliberately displayed, placed in the vacant lot, positioned in a manner that seemed intentional, almost theatrical, almost designed to be discovered, as though someone wanted attention, as though someone wanted the world to see. Word spread quickly through police channels. Detectives were summoned. Crime scene personnel arrived. Reporters began hearing whispers of an unusual homicide. Nobody yet knew the victim's identity. Nobody knew her name. Nobody knew her story. but everyone understood one thing. This case was unlike anything they had seen before. The body belonged to a young woman, slender, dark-haired, in her early 20s. She had been left exposed in broad daylight, in a location where discovery was inevitable. The killer had taken enormous risks, which raised an unsettling question: why? Most murderers hide bodies, they bury them, dump them in remote locations, do whatever they can to avoid detection. But this killer appeared to want the opposite. The victim had not been hidden. She had been presented, almost as a message, almost as a statement. As investigators secured the area, photographs were taken, measurements recorded, witnesses interviewed, every detail examined. Because detectives already suspected something important, the answers to this crime would not come easily. News of the discovery spread rapidly throughout Los Angeles. Reporters rushed toward the scene. Radio stations began receiving information. Rumors multiplied by the hour. A young woman had been murdered, but the full horror of what had happened had not yet been revealed, not to the public, not even to many investigators. That revelation would come later, inside police reports, inside autopsy rooms, inside newspaper headlines that would soon shock the nation, because the condition of the victim's body would transform this homicide into one of the most infamous murder cases in American history. And when detectives finally identified the young woman, America would learn her name, Elizabeth Short, the woman who would forever be remembered as the Black Dahlia. By the afternoon of January 15, 1947, the investigation had already taken a disturbing turn. Detectives had seen countless crime scenes, robberies gone wrong, domestic murders, gang violence. But what lay before them in that vacant Los Angeles lot was something else entirely, something calculated, something deeply unsettling. The young woman found in the grass had not simply been killed. She had been subjected to extraordinary violence, violence that suggested rage, control, or perhaps something even darker. The victim's body showed evidence that she had suffered greatly before death. Investigators quickly realized this was no spontaneous crime. This was deliberate, methodical, planned. What shocked detectives most was the condition in which the body had been left. The killer had taken significant time after the murder, time to move the body, time to arrange the scene, time to ensure the discovery would have maximum impact. Nothing about it appeared accidental, nothing about it appeared rushed. The vacant lot became an outdoor crime scene unlike any Los Angeles had witnessed in years. Police officers stood guard. Detectives searched for footprints, tire tracks, fibers, personal belongings, anything that might identify a suspect, anything that might explain what had happened. But the killer had left very little behind. As word spread through law enforcement, veteran investigators arrived to examine the evidence for themselves. Many left shaken, because the crime suggested something frightening. The person responsible was not acting out of panic. The person responsible appeared organized, confident, and disturbingly comfortable around death. Then came the media. Reporters flooded the area. Photographers competed for information. Newspapers sensed a story unlike any other. And they were right. Within days, the case dominated headlines, not only in Los Angeles, but across the United States. The public became obsessed. People crowded newsstands. Families discussed the case at dinner tables. Radio broadcasts carried updates across the country. Everyone wanted answers. Who was this young woman? Who had done this? And why? The newspapers soon gave Elizabeth Short a nickname that would outlive her real identity: the Black Dahlia. The exact origin remains debated, but the name spread rapidly. It sounded mysterious, dark, cinematic, perfect for newspaper headlines. And once it appeared, it never disappeared. The nickname transformed the case. Elizabeth was no longer simply a murder victim. She became a symbol, a legend, a public fascination, a mystery larger than life itself. and that transformation carried consequences. Because as the story grew, facts often became mixed with rumor, truth became tangled with myth, and separating one from the other would become increasingly difficult. The crime scene itself raised countless questions. Where had Elizabeth been killed? Not in the vacant lot. Investigators were confident of that. The evidence suggested her body had been transported. But from where? A house, an apartment, a garage, a remote location outside the city? Nobody knew. And that uncertainty terrified investigators, because it meant the actual murder scene remained hidden. Somewhere in Los Angeles, waiting to be discovered, perhaps already cleaned, perhaps already gone forever. As detectives worked around the clock, another troubling realization emerged. The killer might not be finished. The boldness of the crime suggested someone seeking attention, someone who wanted recognition, someone who wanted control over the narrative, and if that was true, there was a chance the murderer would contact authorities, or the press, or both. The fear proved justified, because only days after Elizabeth Short's body was discovered, a series of communications began arriving. Letters, messages, items belonging to the victim, sent directly to newspapers, sent by someone claiming responsibility, someone eager to insert themselves into the investigation, someone who appeared to enjoy the growing panic. And as America watched in horror, the Black Dahlia case became even stranger, even darker, and far more dangerous. As the days passed following the discovery of Elizabeth Short's body, Los Angeles remained on edge. The city wanted answers, the police wanted answers, the newspapers wanted answers, but above all else, the killer wanted attention. The Black Dahlia case had already become front-page news. Every development was reported, every rumor was printed, every theory was debated, and somewhere in Los Angeles, the person responsible was watching it all unfold, watching the fear, watching the confusion, watching the investigation struggle to find direction. Then something happened that changed the course of the case. A local newspaper received a package. No return address, no clear identification, just a mysterious delivery. Inside were personal belongings belonging to Elizabeth Short, items that investigators had never publicly disclosed, items only the killer, or someone closely connected to the crime, should have possessed. The contents had been carefully cleaned, wiped down, as though someone had taken deliberate steps to remove fingerprints, to remove evidence, to remove anything that could lead police directly to them. It was a chilling discovery, because it confirmed something detectives had already suspected. The killer was following the case closely. Alongside the items was a message, short, taunting, designed to attract attention, designed to prove involvement. The sender appeared eager to demonstrate power, eager to show that while police searched desperately for answers, they remained one step ahead. More communications followed. Letters, notes, messages sent to newspapers, each one fueling public fascination, each one increasing pressure on investigators, each one creating new headlines. Reporters raced to publish every detail. Circulation numbers exploded. Readers couldn't get enough. The Black Dahlia case was no longer simply a homicide investigation. It had become a national obsession, a media phenomenon, the kind of story that dominated conversations from coast to coast. But the publicity created problems, serious problems, because as news coverage intensified, so did the number of false confessions. Hundreds of people contacted police, some seeking attention, others suffering from mental illness, many claiming responsibility, most completely unrelated to the crime. Detectives found themselves drowning in leads. Every phone call had to be investigated, every letter had to be examined, every confession had to be evaluated, and each dead end consumed valuable time. The case became a magnet for opportunists. Psychics claimed visions. Witnesses emerged with unbelievable stories. Strangers insisted they possessed secret knowledge. Many wanted fame, many wanted money, many simply wanted to be part of the story. Meanwhile, the real killer remained hidden, invisible among the noise, invisible among the rumors, invisible among the endless stream of false information. And that may have been exactly what they wanted. Some investigators believed the letters revealed important clues. The writer appeared confident, calculated, comfortable manipulating public attention, comfortable watching others react. The communication suggested someone who enjoyed control, someone who enjoyed being discussed, someone who may have viewed the investigation almost like a game. But even that remained uncertain, because one haunting question lingered over every letter, every package, every message. Were they truly from the killer, or from someone exploiting a tragedy? Even today, not every communication can be verified with certainty. Some may have been authentic, others may have been elaborate hoaxes. The truth remains buried somewhere in the shadows of history. What detectives did know was that the investigation was growing larger by the day, more evidence, more witnesses, more theories, more suspects, and despite all the attention, despite all the manpower, despite all the headlines, police remained no closer to solving the crime. The pressure on the Los Angeles Police Department became enormous. Citizens demanded arrests, newspapers demanded progress, city leaders demanded results. The Black Dahlia case was becoming an embarrassment, a nightmare, a mystery that refused to yield answers. Soon, investigators would turn their attention toward a growing list of suspects: doctors, criminals, con artists, violent offenders, men with secrets, men with motives, men who seemed capable of terrible things. Some appeared frighteningly plausible, others seemed unlikely. Yet all would be scrutinized, because somewhere among them, perhaps hidden in plain sight, was the person responsible for one of the most infamous murders in American history. The pressure was relentless. Every day that passed without an arrest, the headlines grew louder, the criticism grew sharper, and the frustration inside the Los Angeles Police Department continued to build. The Black Dahlia investigation quickly became one of the largest murder investigations in American history. Detectives worked around the clock. Leads poured in from across the country. Tips arrived by the hundreds, then the thousands. Every phone call had to be checked, every witness interviewed, every potential suspect investigated. The numbers became staggering. Hundreds of officers, thousands of reports, countless hours spent chasing answers. Yet despite the enormous effort, the case remained frustratingly out of reach. Part of the problem was the city itself. Los Angeles in the 1940s was expanding rapidly. People came and went constantly. Records were incomplete. Witness memories faded. Important evidence disappeared. And every passing day made solving the crime more difficult. Then there were the suspects. So many suspects. Over the decades, investigators would examine dozens of individuals. Some were dismissed quickly, others remained under suspicion for years. A few continue to be debated even today. One suspect was a man named Leslie Dillon, a bellhop with an unusual fascination for crime. Dillon attracted attention after communicating with investigators and discussing theories that seemed disturbingly specific. Some detectives became convinced he knew more than he admitted, perhaps much more. Yet proving involvement proved impossible. Evidence was lacking. Questions remained unanswered. And eventually, the case against him weakened. No charges were filed, no conviction followed. The mystery continued. Another name that would later attract significant attention was Dr. George Hodel, a physician, educated, respected, and surrounded by controversy, years after the murder. Former investigators and researchers would revisit his name repeatedly. Suspicion intensified after old police files revealed that Hodel had once been placed under surveillance. Detectives secretly listened to conversations inside his home. At the time, some investigators believed he deserved closer scrutiny. What they discovered fueled speculation for decades. Yet speculation is not proof, and proof is what investigators needed. Despite years of discussion, no court ever found George Hoddle responsible for Elizabeth Short's murder. The debate continues to this day. Other suspects emerged: career criminals, violent offenders, men with histories of assault, men known to frequent the same areas Elizabeth visited, men whose backgrounds raised troubling questions. Some appeared promising, then collapsed under scrutiny. Others seemed dangerous, yet lacked any direct connection to the victim. Time and again, investigators believed they might be getting close, only to find themselves back at the beginning. The deeper detectives dug, the more complicated the case became. Witnesses contradicted one another, stories changed, memories faded, facts became tangled with rumors, and rumors became tangled with legends. The media attention made everything worse. Newspaper stories sometimes introduced information before detectives could verify it. Sensational reporting blurred the line between evidence and speculation. The public demanded certainty, but certainty remained elusive. Years turned into decades. Detectives retired. New investigators inherited old files. Boxes of reports changed hands. Fresh eyes examined old evidence. Yet the result remained the same. No arrest, no prosecution, no definitive answer. The Black Dahlia case became more than an investigation. It became an obsession, a puzzle that generations of detectives believed they could solve, a mystery that researchers spent entire careers pursuing, a crime that refused to surrender its secrets, and perhaps the most unsettling possibility of all is that the killer may have watched the entire investigation unfold, may have read the headlines, may have listened to the radio reports, may have lived the rest of their life knowing they had escaped justice. If that is true, then one of the most notorious murderers in American history was never identified, never arrested, never punished. A chilling thought, but not an impossible one, because despite all the effort, all the suspects, all the theories, the Black Dahlia mystery remained unsolved, and it remains unsolved today.